Late March draped the sky in a heavy gray, like a morning veil stretched over Green Haven Cemetery. The wind carried a biting chill, whispering to the bare oaks as friends and neighbors huddled close, their silence louder than any prayer. In the center of the gathering stood a small white coffin, barely the length of a dining table. Adorned with soft wildflowers and a single blue ribbon, it held what no parent should ever have to let go of. Robert Taylor stood beside it, motionless. His shoulders, once strong, were slumped beneath the weight of unspeakable grief. His face, unshaven and hollow, looked years older than it had just 3 days prior. That was the day his daughter, Sophie, only 6 years old, was pronounced dead after a prolonged seizure. No brain activity. The doctor had said, signing the death certificate with cold finality. She had been dressed in her favorite butterfly dress, laid gently in the coffin like a sleeping child. The funeral had almost reached its end when it happened. A sudden rush of paws against gravel. Gasps broke the stillness as a large German shepherd burst through the crowd. The dog wore a K9 harness, tags clinking with each stride. "Get that dog away," someone shouted. But it was too late. The dog, Dakota, leapt onto the small white coffin, planted his front paws firmly, then slowly climbed atop it. He didn't growl. He didn't whine. He simply lay there, tense, alert, eyes fixed downward, as though he could sense something none of the mourners could. No one moved. No one breathed. And then a voice from the back, quiet but clear. "That's not grief, he's alerting." Sophie Taylor was the kind of child who made people stop in their tracks. Not because she was loud or demanding, but because she seemed to carry something rare, a quiet kind of light. At just 6 years old, her laugh had a way of softening even the hardest of hearts. She wore mismatched socks, tied her blonde hair into crooked pigtails, and named every squirrel she saw. But life hadn't been kind to Sophie, not from the beginning. When she was only 3, the car accident that took her mother left her with a traumatic brain injury. Her father, Robert Taylor, survived the crash, but not without cost. The man who had once run a successful veterinary clinic, always quick with a smile and a steady hand for injured animals, was now consumed by a single mission: keeping his daughter alive. The seizures came unpredictably. Some were small, leaving her dazed and quiet. Others struck like lightning, lasting minutes that felt like hours. They robbed her of sleep, appetite, and normal childhood joys. Birthday parties became risky. School attendance was rare. Parks required helmets. Emergency rooms became routine. But Sophie never complained. "They're just sparks in my brain," she once told her father, brushing crumbs off her stuffed elephant. "They come and go, but I'm still here." Robert had clung to those words on his hardest days. Days when insurance denied coverage. Nights when her tiny body convulsed in his arms while they waited for an ambulance. He tried to work from home, medical transcription, so he could always be nearby. The house was quiet, sterile, full of blinking machines and emergency medications tucked into every corner. Then came the day that changed everything. It was the anniversary of Jennifer's death, Sophie's mother. For 3 years now, Robert and Sophie had followed the same ritual, hiking to her favorite trail in the Appalachian foothills, laying flowers beneath the overlook where she once photographed sunsets. This year, Sophie picked dandelions. "They're tough," she said, "and they grow even when nobody wants them to." They parked the car and began walking up the trail, Sophie humming softly, her medical bag slung over her shoulder. Near the top, she paused. "Daddy, do you hear that?" Robert didn't, but Sophie tilted her head, stepped off the path, and began moving towards something hidden beneath a fallen log. When Robert caught up, he saw her kneeling, whispering in that gentle voice she used for hurt animals. "It's okay," she said. "We won't hurt you." What he saw next took his breath away. A German shepherd puppy, no older than 3 months, was wedged beneath the rotting wood. Its fur was patchy with mud and dried blood. One leg was twisted unnaturally, but it was the burn marks that made Robert's stomach turn. Small, deliberate circles where skin had been seared. "Daddy," Sophie said, eyes filling with tears. "He's hurt like I was." Robert's instincts as a vet kicked in. He removed his jacket, gently wrapped the puppy, and lifted it out. The puppy didn't fight. It didn't growl. It looked directly at Sophie and exhaled a shaky breath, as if surrendering. "He knows we're helping," she said. "I want to name him Dakota." At first, Robert hesitated. He didn't want Sophie to get attached to a dog that might not survive the night. But then he looked at her face, determined, fierce, full of something he hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. "Dakota," he said softly. "That's a strong name." The nearest clinic was closed. So Robert drove straight to the Blue Ridge Animal Sanctuary. His old colleague, Dr. Sarah Williams, was still the director. She didn't ask questions. She saw the burns, the fractures, the dehydration, and set to work. "Someone did this," she whispered, her voice sharp with anger. This wasn't an accident. While Sarah prepared x-rays, Sophie sat beside Dakota's table, stroking his paw. The dog's eyes never left hers. And when the vet tried to separate them for a procedure, Dakota whimpered until she came back into view. "I've never seen a bond like this," Sarah said. "Especially not with an abused animal. They usually don't trust anyone." Dakota required surgery, antibiotics, months of care. Sophie insisted on visiting daily. She read books aloud to him, snuck him treats, and helped with his physical therapy. And something incredible began to happen. Sophie's seizures decreased, then stopped. Days passed without incident. Her neurologist was stunned. The dog hadn't just given her comfort. He was giving her life. Then came the day when Dakota did something no one expected. Sophie was seated beside his kennel when her body stiffened. The start of a seizure. But before any human noticed, Dakota leapt forward, broke open the kennel door, and pressed himself against her body, barking in a pattern that would later become unmistakable. His alert signal. 2 minutes before her symptoms, Sarah said, watching the security footage. He knew. He sensed it. He didn't need training. He had found his purpose. From that moment on, Dakota was more than a rescued dog. He was a living lifeline, a guardian, a friend, and for Sophie Taylor, he was proof that some souls were born to find each other, no matter how broken the road. Dakota's presence transformed Sophie's life in quiet, powerful ways. With each passing week, her seizures grew less frequent, less intense. Her energy returned. Her laughter came more freely. For the first time since the accident, Robert allowed himself to breathe without fear. They developed routines, simple joys that once seemed impossible. Saturday mornings at the park. Story time before bed, with Dakota curled at Sophie's feet. A sense of normalcy had begun to return. And then the world changed again. It happened during Dakota's K-9 graduation ceremony, a symbolic event celebrating his new status as an official member of the River Crest Police Department. It was a sunny morning, the field lined with folding chairs and decorated with American flags. Sophie wore her favorite blue dress with butterflies. Dakota had been professionally groomed, his fur gleaming under the sun. The entire town turned out to witness the ceremony. Robert sat in the front row, pride swelling in his chest as Dakota flawlessly completed his demonstration. Then came the moment Sophie had practiced for all week, walking up to President Dakota with his official vest. She stepped forward, carrying the tiny vest with embroidered badge, her hands trembling from excitement. But as she turned to return to her seat, something changed. Dakota's ears shot forward. His body stiffened. His eyes locked onto Sophie with an intensity that Robert instantly recognized. "Sophie," Robert called out, already rising. But he was too late. Her small frame crumpled. Her eyes rolled back. A seizure, sudden, violent, and terrifying, struck in full view of the entire town. Dakota broke formation, dashed toward her collapsing body, and positioned himself underneath her to cushion the fall. He let out the distinct bark he used only for the most dangerous seizures. The sound echoed across the field, cutting through the stunned silence like a siren. Panic set in. Officer Lowry radioed for medical support, while Robert dropped to his knees, pulling the emergency medication from his coat pocket with shaking hands. But this time, the meds didn't work. Sophie's lips turned blue. "We need to transport now," the paramedic said firmly. They lifted her onto the stretcher. Dakota tried to climb in with her, straining against the handler's grip. "She needs him," Robert said, voice shaking. "Let him come." Inside the ambulance, Dakota lay beside Sophie's unmoving body, pressing against her side as if willing her to hold on. At Rivercrest General Hospital, chaos reigned. Dr. Mark Peterson, an experienced but emotionally distant physician, was he attending that night. He reviewed Sophie's vitals, expression cold, analytical. "She's not regaining consciousness," he said after hours of failed interventions. "We've administered maximum doses. The seizure has stopped, but the EEG shows minimal brain activity." Robert stood at Sophie's bedside, fingers laced with hers, Dakota resting his chin across their joined hands. He refused to accept what he was hearing. "She's come back before," Robert whispered. "She just needs more time." But Peterson was unmoved. "You should prepare for the possibility that she won't recover meaningful neurological function," he said flatly. When Robert pushed for a second opinion, Peterson bristled. "I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm seeing." He delivered the next blow with clinical detachment. "She suffered a catastrophic neurological event. The kindest thing now is to consider comfort care. Let her go peacefully." Robert was frozen in place. His heart beat, but his world had stopped. Dakota, sensing his distress, whined and paced the room. He began to display the same alert behavior that had always preceded Sophie's seizures. Ears perked, stance tense, a low, rhythmic whimper building in his throat. Robert noticed. The doctors didn't. "I want her transferred," he said, his voice trembling, "to Children's Memorial, to Dr. Montgomery." "That facility is 3 hours away," Peterson snapped. "She's not stable. And even if she were, it wouldn't change the outcome." But Robert remembered Dakota's alerts. He remembered Sophie's strength. And more than anything, he remembered a promise he made in the NICU when she was a premature infant fighting for life. "I told her I'd never stop fighting for her," he said. "And I won't start now." Peterson left the room, dismissive, but Robert wasn't alone. Dakota moved to Sophie's bedside and began to whine again, soft, steady, insistent. His eyes never left her face. And deep down, Robert knew something wasn't right. Not with Sophie, and not with the way the system had written her off so quickly. He had trusted the professionals before. But now, he would trust the one creature who had never failed his daughter. The dog who had been broken and healed. The dog who had once saved her from darkness. Dakota was alerting again, and Robert wasn't going to ignore him this time. The morning of Sophie's funeral dawned quiet and gray. Clouds hung low over river crests like heavy curtains, and a cold breeze swept gently across Greenhaven Cemetery. Nearly 200 mourners gathered on the hillside, standing in respectful silence around the small white coffin that rested near Jennifer Taylor's grave, Sophie's mother, gone 3 years before. Robert stood still, barely breathing, staring down at the polished surface that reflected a face he no longer recognized. His mind was numb, his body hollow. He had spent the last 72 hours filling out forms, making impossible decisions, signing away what little remained of hope, choosing the smallest casket from a catalog, selecting a grave plot for a child, writing an obituary that would never come close to capturing who she was. Sophie had once told him, "Daddy, people are like my rocks. You just have to look closely to see what makes them special." Now the little girl who saw beauty in broken things was gone. Pastor William stepped up to the podium with his Bible in hand and began the service with a voice low and steady. As he spoke, mourners placed stuffed animals, drawings, and hand-folded paper cranes into a basket near the grave. Among them stood Sophie's classmates, neighbors, even strangers who had heard the story of the girl and her dog. Dakota, however, was not there. The funeral director had enforced a strict no-animals policy. The dog remained at the police K-9 facility, under Officer Lowry's care. For 2 days he had refused to eat, refused to rest. He sat near the door, waiting, watching. And then, minutes before the funeral began, he escaped. He pushed through 2 secure doors. He tore through a locked gate. By the time Lowry caught up, Dakota had bitten through the leash and was running full speed toward the cemetery. Now, as Pastor Williams began to close his Bible, Robert heard commotion near the back of the gathering. He turned and saw Officer Lowry jogging up the gravel path, breathless, his sleeve torn. I tried to stop him, Lowry whispered. But he needs to say goodbye. Robert didn't argue. He simply nodded. The crowd parted instinctively as Dakota approached the casket. He didn't hesitate. He moved with purpose. Reaching the small white box, he lifted his front paws, then climbed atop it, laying down in a position eerily similar to the one he'd taken during Sophie's seizures. Eyes forward, body tense, ears high. The funeral director stepped forward, alarmed. "Mr. Taylor, I'm sorry, but this is highly irregular." "Wait," Robert said softly. "Look at him." Dakota wasn't whining. He wasn't howling. He was alert. The same posture he always used when Sophie was in danger. From the back, Jake Morgan, Sophie's uncle and a former Army combat medic, removed his sunglasses. His eyes narrowed, fixed on the dog. Something about Dakota's stance triggered a memory. He had seen it before, in Afghanistan, in dogs trained to detect the faintest signs of life in patients who appeared gone. "He's not grieving," Jake murmured. "He's alerting." The murmurs spread quickly. Some shook their heads. Others whispered. The funeral director looked panicked. Jake stepped forward. "Open the coffin," he said. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "This is insane," someone muttered. "It's over." But Jake's voice was steady. "That dog has never given a false alert. Not once. And if he thinks she's in there alive, we need to check." The funeral director refused. "State law. Once sealed, the casket cannot be disturbed." "I'll take responsibility," Robert said quietly, "if there's even a chance." At that moment, Dr. Amar Singh, Sophie's consulting neurologist, arrived. She had come to pay her respects, but upon seeing Dakota, her expression changed. As a physician who reviewed Sophie's final EEGs, she said clearly, "I believe there were anomalous signs that warrant reevaluation." Chief Wilson of the River Crest Police stepped forward. "I believe we have cause to act. Open it." Officer Lowry moved forward, unlatched the casket lid, and slowly lifted it. Silence fell. Sophie lay peacefully inside, her hands folded, her butterfly dress pressed gently against satin lining. To the untrained eye, nothing appeared out of place. But Jake reached in, pressed 2 fingers to her neck. His jaw tightened. "I feel a pulse," he said. Gasps turned into sobs. Dr. Singh moved quickly, shining a penlight into Sophie's eyes. Pupillary response is slow, but present. This is not death. This is catalepsy. Within minutes, paramedics were called. An ambulance pulled into the cemetery, lights flashing, as Sophie was carefully lifted from the casket and placed onto a stretcher. Dakota refused to leave her side, growling when anyone came too close. She was alive. Faintly, fragilely, but undeniably alive. Robert fell to his knees, shaking, clutching Dakota's fur. "You knew," he whispered. "You never gave up." As the ambulance sped away, Pastor Williams looked out over the stunned mourners. "We came here today to bury a child," he said, his voice trembling. "But I believe we've just witnessed a miracle." And standing atop that hill, watching the ambulance disappear down the winding road, the townspeople of River Crest realized something they would never forget. Sometimes, when the world declares death, it takes a dog to remind us that love is still alive. 3 days after the miracle at Greenhaven Cemetery, Sophie Taylor lay in the pediatric intensive care unit of Children's Memorial Hospital. Machines hummed steadily around her, their blinking lights and soft beeps offering a rhythm that felt more like prayer than science. Robert had not left her side. Neither had Dakota. The room had become a sanctuary of silence and waiting. But something had shifted. An unspoken belief now filled the space. Hope had re-entered the conversation. Dr. Eliza Montgomery, the neurologist Robert had once been told was too far, too expensive, too unrealistic, now sat quietly at the edge of Sophie's bed. She had reviewed every chart, every EEG, every detail of Sophie's case. And she did not look defeated. "There is more preserved function than we thought," she said gently. Her brain didn't shut down. It retreated. Robert leaned forward, gripping Sophie's hand. "So she could recover?" Montgomery didn't offer empty promises, but her words carried weight. "She's responding to your voice." To Dakota, We're seeing purposeful movement, cognitive indicators. It will be a long road, Mr. Taylor, but I believe your daughter is still very much here. It wasn't the kind of miracle the movies showed. It was slower, measured, but real, day by day. Sophie's eyes stayed open longer. Her fingers began to twitch on command. She responded to voices, to familiar smells, to Dakota's soft nuzzles. Her first word, barely a whisper, came 2 weeks later. Dakota. It wasn't just a name. It was gratitude. It was survival. It was a bond no science could fully explain. The story spread like wildfire. Local news picked it up first, then regional stations, then national media. A child once pronounced dead, saved by her dog. Hospitals received calls. Pet shelters received donations. And in the midst of it all, Robert did something he had never imagined himself doing. He founded something new, Sophie's Angels, a nonprofit dedicated to training rescue dogs as medical alert companions for children with neurological disorders. Inspired by Dakota, fueled by Sophie, he worked late nights with lawyers and trainers. Sarah Williams, from the Blue Ridge Animal Sanctuary, offered space for pilot programs. Officer Lowry helped design the K-9 training modules. Jake Morgan, once a man lost to guilt and regret, took on the role of operations director, combining his military background with a newfound sense of purpose. And Dakota became both mascot and mentor. His K-9 duties were reduced to ceremonial appearances and public education events. But his real job remained the same. Sophie's shadow, her guardian, her constant heartbeat. Months passed. Autumn turned the Appalachian trees gold and red. Sophie's speech improved. Her motor skills, though still clumsy, allowed her to navigate the world from her wheelchair with increasing independence. One afternoon, as snow gently began to fall for the first time that season, Robert helped Sophie out to the backyard. Bundled in a thick coat, she pointed to the untouched snow. "Let him run," she said. Dakota bounded across the yard, leaving joyful trails. Then, without being asked, he circled Sophie slowly, his paw prints forming a perfect heart around her. Robert stood still, watching, then lifted his phone and took a picture. That image, Sophie in her wheelchair, Dakota curled beside her, a heart tracing snow, would become a banner for Sophie's Angels, a symbol of everything they had fought for, everything they believed in. At the official foundation launch ceremony months later, Sophie was awarded a ribbon of courage. Dakota was given a medal for extraordinary service beyond duty. The governor himself attended. During his speech, Robert said something simple, something that would stay with every person in that room. "On the day the world gave up on my daughter," he said, voice steady, "one creature did not. A broken dog, burned, abandoned, discarded, refused to believe she was gone. And because of him, she wasn't." He paused, looking towards Sophie, who was mouthing the words right along with him. "Sometimes," he continued, "the faintest heartbeat is all you need. Sometimes that's enough to carry love through even the darkest night." As applause echoed around them, Dakota rested his head on Sophie's lap. Her hand, still slightly trembling, reached down and stroked his ear. She didn't need to say anything. Dakota already knew. Love had brought her back. And this time she wasn't going anywhere.